Hi, Julie.
Hi, Susie.
Oh, this is so lovely to talk to you. You're all the way in Alabama, and I'm in Manchester, UK.
That's right.
This is very exciting. I have been looking forward to this conversation with you all week. It's now Friday afternoon, and thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's taken us a couple months to get this together. We keep having to rearrange things.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why, but your schedule, my schedule, both of our schedules. So when before we started recording, I said, "Oh, it's so lovely to see your beautiful face," because we've been talking back and forth so much.
We have. And I want to say, first of all, that I am so fascinated by what you do. I don't think, and I'm being very honest here, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to record this conversation a year ago, or just over a year ago when I started the podcast, because I think I would have thought, oh gosh, people are going to think I'm a little woo-woo. But I think I've got to the stage where I'm quite comfortable now in the podcast talking about things that I'm curious about. And when I got the approach from your assistant, I just thought, yes, I am so interested in this. And I think that if I am interested in it, I think a lot of other people are too. So, Julie, tell us, what is it you do and how did you get into this line of work?
Oh, I'm an inventor of surgical devices, Susie, that are sold throughout the world, some of which have been on the market for 30 years. They're sold in the UK. They're sold all over Europe. They're sold all over. And I am one of those crazy serial entrepreneurs that you hear about, who I have started 9 companies in 5 industries. And people say, how does that work? I go, well, you make money from one, and then I would start another one of something else I was interested in, and then it just goes from there and it snowballs. So I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. So what does that mean?
That means of psychicness.
I'm a buffet of psychicness, girl. How's that? So what that means is most psychics just talk to dead people. Or mediums, I guess a lot of them like to call in. And you know how in medicine they've divided the body into parts. You got the neurologist and the cardiologist and the whatever. Well, the psychic world has done that too. You got the mediums and you got the animal communicators and you got that. My feeling is you connect with spirit, you can do it all. And that's what I teach in my classes. So I'm able to, in my buffet offerings, I'm able to scan people energetically and facilitate energetic healings. I can do the same with pets. I can communicate with any spirit telepathically, whether it's deceased or whether it's attached to a body. Humans and pets, trees, plants, whatever. I can tell how close to death somebody is. I can do past life stuff. We can go back and see without hypnotism.
Yeah,
I do what I call past life scans. Those are a blast, Susie. Those are so much fun.
Okay. We need to get into that, but I don't know where to start. I don't think you've even finished.
Okay, well, I'm not done yet. I still have other stuff. I'm not done yet. So we can do advice from spirit guides and angels. I have a call-in show every Thursday night called Ask Julie Ryan. And last night I had 52 callers. I think I got 20 on in a 2-hour radio show that we release as a podcast and a YouTube video. And so people called in and they ranged in questions from, can you scan me medically and do a healing? My little girl has a heart murmur. Can you help? My 16-year-old is a runaway and she's been missing for 9 months. Can you help us find out if she's alive and where she is and does she want to be found? To, can you scan my dog? I'm thinking of moving to another area of the country. Is this in my best interest to do that? So it's this whole plethora of questions, which makes it so much fun because everybody's questions are different. And, the buffet, they just choose whatever they want to do. Yeah. I have this in my life. Did I have any past lives that relate to that? So it's just so much fun. Yeah. And I'm not one of those psychics who's had dead people chasing her since childhood, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that.
So how old were you when you realized that you had this gift?
I didn't. I learned how to do it. And that's what I teach in my classes to people all over the world. We've had people go through my class from 10 countries. The only prerequisite is you got to speak English.
Right.
That's it.
So this is something that people can learn to do.
I did. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything I do, I learned. We all come in with the ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. We've all had situations, Susie, where we think of somebody and then out of the blue, seemingly, we run into them, or they text us, or they call us, or they email us, and we say, oh, I was just thinking of you. What a coincidence. No coincidence there. That was your intuitive abilities at play. We just discount them. We'll get a gut feeling for something, and then it'll happen. We'll get a gut feeling not to do something, and we'll do it. We'll go against it, and then we'll regret it. That's all intuitive abilities. We all have it. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing them.
Isn't that lovely to think that everybody has this innate ability? That everyone has this intuition. It's just that we've kind of lost touch with it and dismissed it. But how nice that we can all find a way to get back to it.
Well, people join my class and I teach it quarterly, and it's 4 Saturdays for 2 hours on each Saturday. And they learn how to do all the stuff that I do in basically 8 hours. And the first hour is lecture and discussion. The second hour is practicum. Everybody does it. And they're all amazed because most of them don't have any skills in woo-woo. That's what I call it, woo-woo. Yeah. So they're amazed how it works. Certainly, the more you do it, the easier it is. The more you trust, basically, is all it is. You trust the information you get. And then when it's validated, then it just becomes second nature. But I turn my abilities on and off at will. I don't walk around scanning people or seeing dead people, but I can turn it on in a nanosecond, and then I just turn it off. Yeah, Gosh. It's fun.
Wow. So, of all those buffet that you described, I think one thing I would certainly like to talk to you about today is this whole, the subject of past lives, because it's something that there's now a huge body of evidence, isn't there? I mean, I've looked at the work of Dr. Jim Tucker, and I'm actually going to link to a podcast that he did recently. And it's really quite overwhelming, the amount of case studies where he's talked to a child who has remembered a past life in quite astonishing detail that they have been corroborated as absolutely correct. Exactly. So I think at this point it's quite difficult to dismiss this all as nonsense. And I think what I'm interested in is... because a lot of people have, whether it be emotional issues or physical issues in this life, and we don't generally think that they've inherited something from someone else. So could you talk us a little bit about how this works and what sort of things do you see in terms of people being affected in this life by something that was not theirs?
Great questions. Our heads are big satellite dishes, Susie, and they receive and they transmit frequencies, kind of like when you have a satellite dish on your house for your television, and then it's bringing in channels. It's bringing in Netflix or whatever on the satellite, or I guess Netflix you can get from the satellite, but the different channels, like the cable channels and, things like that, you can get it on cable, you can get it on a satellite. Every spirit has their own frequency that they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. And in order for us to communicate with a spirit or to access past lives, all we have to do is think of somebody. Whether you knew them or not is irrelevant. If you want to talk to a deceased loved one, you think of them, you immediately turn your satellite dish head to their frequency. and you're connected with them energetically. If you want to talk to Winston Churchill or Mother Teresa or whomever, Napoleon, it doesn't matter. You think of them, you're immediately connected to their spirit's frequency. And our spirits keep the same frequency throughout all of our lifetimes. So let's say I want to do a past life on you. I do it. I'm an entrepreneur, so of course it's different how I do it. Most people will do a hypnotist kind of a thing. They'll hypnotize the person, that with whom they're working. What I do is I envision myself, Susan, in this endless hallway, very narrow walls, very tall ceiling. There are 12-inch by 12-inch mirrors that line the walls vertically and horizontally. They're in perfect formation. That's probably me. Maybe that means I was potty trained too early or something, but they're all, boom, in a line. And we'll ask a question like, does Susie have any past lives in which she was involved with the media? I'm just making this up, since you're a podcast host now. And then the lifetimes that, or whatever the media meant in that timeline. And the lifetimes that are applicable will come out from the wall, and they're represented by these mirrors, almost as if they're on a hydraulic arm. So I always ask a question that's general, and I want to see how many lifetimes come out from the wall. So that tells me how much of an issue it's been in your past lives. And then I'll say, show me the one that applies the most. That one will come out the furthest, and then I'll envision myself walking into that mirror. And it's like I've walked into a movie scene, and I'll be given where it was, when it was, what was going on, all of that. And it's always interesting because there's always a correlation with what's going on in that person's current life. And there are parts of it that resonate. How this works is we have a script that we come in with when we're born. All of us do. We all come in to create. Well, there are limitless ways to create, right? We're creating an interview right now. We're creating life because our hearts are working. We're breathing air. We create, right? That's why we're here, for an adventure. And what I find is that there's a script oftentimes that will go through several lifetimes. Different timeline, different location, different gender, often, different set of circumstances, same basic script. Because our spirit wants to explore that script from a different perspective. An example, I talk in analogies a lot, Susie, because I believe that it helps give our human minds a frame of reference for all this woo-woo stuff that we're talking about. So my favorite analogy for past lives is think of Hamlet. How many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it? Who knows? I don't know if we could even calculate it. Mm-hmm. But think about, I think he's been dead 600 years or something. Think about all the languages, all the time periods. Who were the actors? Who was the director? Who was the costumer? Who was the set designer? Who was doing it in their house, with kids playing it, right? All the same script, different perspectives, different interpretations. So it's feasible, in my mind, that somebody that, for instance, that in this lifetime is suffering from cancer, from some form of cancer. In past lives, perhaps they were the spouse of, the child of, the parent of, the friend of, the doctor of, the whatever of. In this round, they wanted to experience and explore what it was to be the patient. Perhaps they had cancer in multiple lifetimes, and in this lifetime, they wanted to explore, okay, what's it like in 2021 with the medical advances that we have? What's it like for me to heal my body this time around? How can I learn things? How can I explore and experience things that weren't available to me in a different time period,
right,
if you will? So we're all here to explore and expand our spirits. And then that goes into the collective consciousness. Now, I'm really getting woo-woo on you here, so hang with me for a minute.
That's okay. Okay. I'm still here.
So you think about, how do toddlers, babies, before they can walk and talk in sentences, how do they know how to use an iPad or an iPhone? How's that work? They know how to use it better than I do. Well, it's because of the experiences of all of us using those devices. These babies come in and they know how to do it because that information's there in the collective consciousness, and they are coming in already pre-programmed with it. So each generation comes in more advanced than the last. We think, okay, we need to teach little children things. Little children teach us things because they're more advanced. So that's the nutshell version of, we all want to explore a script, and then we have lots of subscripts when we come in. And that's why we incarnate, is to have the experiences and to explore and create.
Right. And can you give us an example, Julie? I mean, it sounds like the way you're describing it is like coming into this world is like going to school to learn something different that you hadn't learned before. And I'm just wondering if you could give us an example of where somebody has, you've helped someone to see what a past life was that was currently impacting on a situation, and it's helped them to resolve it. Is there anything that springs to mind that you can?
I have two favorite stories on that. And my take on when we come in, not so much a school to learn, it's more to explore and experience. I think when we put it in the pretext of we have to learn something, then that makes us feel like, okay, I've got to get this right. There's no right, there's no wrong in the spirit world. There's no time in the spirit world. So it's possible that 100 lifetimes of 100 years may not even be a blip on the radar screen in the spirit world. So we don't have to get anything right. It's just an exploration. It's like, okay, well, if I do it this way, this is the result I get. If I do it that way, this is the result I get. And we create out of the contrast. People say, well, I wish I didn't have to go through that. Well, you went through that so you could create what you wanted because you knew what you didn't want.
Oh, I see.
I'm not saying heaven's boring, but what I'm told from spirit is you have a thought in heaven, the equivalent of a thought, takes less than a nanosecond, and it materializes. So spirit looks at our experiences in humanity as fun, some of which we look at it as horrific.
Yeah.
But they're like, ooh, this is interesting. Look what's happening with this. How are we creating that? What's going on there? So that's the hit that I get. Two quick stories that are so fun. Please. One is from a woman who's Italian, and she was living in the UK, in London, and she was a flight attendant for ANA, the All Nippon Airlines.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I was doing a consult with her, and she said, I choose these men that just are not good for me. They're not available. They're either married or they can't commit to a relationship or whatever. And she said, what is up with that? Do I have past lives with that? So what we found out was, I did a past life with her. I forget when it was. I think it was in the late 1800s. It was in Kyoto, Japan. She was a geisha. Well, if you know anything about geishas, they're like escorts, and they entertain usually married men, right, who sponsor them, but they can never have them. And oftentimes there's a lot of love between the geisha and her sponsor, but she can't ever be married to him. He can't commit to her because he's normally got his own family, right? So I said, you were a geisha, and I gave her whatever the year was, and I could see her, and I described her and everything. And she gasped, Susie. And I said, what? She said, I used to work for ANA Airlines. And she said, my training was in Kyoto. When I got there, when I landed, she said, it felt so familiar to me. And she said, my first day of training, she said, I'd never held chopsticks, let alone used them. She said, my first day of training, I'm in the lunchroom. I'm the only non-Japanese woman in the room, and I'm using chopsticks better than anybody in the room. And they're all saying, how are you doing this? Because you use them better than we do, and we've used them our whole lives. So it was a lot of different similarities, to the point where she had been in that town, as a geisha, and now she had come back for this training, and it resonated with her when she was there, but she didn't know why. But now she knew why she was choosing men that weren't available. And that was just one of the lifetimes that she was in which she was choosing men. So knowing that, she knows she can make different decisions now. I don't have to continue repeating this. I'm here to explore what it's like to expand out from that. Does that make sense?
Okay.
She
could leave that paradigm behind because she understood what it was.
She understood.
She could choose differently.
Yeah, well, that it was the script that was playing, and she had the opportunity to create out from there. And the interesting thing too, Susie, is she is now in a committed relationship and engaged.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
After we found that out. My second story involves the UK as well, my second favorite story. And it's a client who is a retired CEO of a huge company, publicly traded, and he had cancer. So we did a past life thing on him. Well, come to find out that he had been an admiral in the British Navy in the late 1700s. And we got his name and we got the dates and all of that. And he was the commander of the Atlantic Fleet. He was in charge of the Atlantic Fleet.
So he was high up.
He was really high up. He was a big admiral. And he had been, his claim to fame was some naval battle in which the French were involved. I don't think it was against the French, but I think they were allies, and I don't remember all the details. Anyway, what I got was he was very used to commanding multitudes of people and being the leader, both as the Navy admiral and as the CEO of this company. I think he had 10,000 employees or something crazy, some huge company. But he wasn't so good at letting people take care of him. He wanted to be in control. He wanted to be calling shots. He wanted to do that. Well, certainly as an admiral, when you're in battle, you need to be good at that. You need to be strategic. Yes. There are lots of lives depending on you. Same script, see? When he was a CEO, there were lots of lives and lots of families that were depending on him, but different timeline, different set of circumstances, different scenario. So the cancer was to give him the opportunity to allow people to care for him. Yeah. It was something out of his control that he needed to rely on his wife and his doctors and his family and his friends to support him, it was very unusual for him. It felt very uncomfortable because he wanted to be in control. And that's what I find life events will keep ramping up until it really gets our attention. So we'll have something happen that feels very benign and we'll disregard it. And then we'll have something else that maybe is a little bit more of a attention grabber. And then when you've got cancer and it's metastasized and your life's on the line, that really gets your attention. So he went through the therapies. He had surgery. He allowed his wife and his doctors to take care of him. And now he's totally cancer free.
Oh, so just that insight.
Well, that and healings and medicine and
lots of other stuff. Wow.
But it was part of the healing equation for him. My woman who's the flight attendant, that was part of the healing equation on the emotional side of the spectrum with her finding out she'd been a geisha in that lifetime. So past lives are so fun because the admiral, we were able to corroborate all the details that we had gotten, this admiral's name, the battle that we were talking about, that I got the information on. I barely know American naval history. I certainly don't know British naval history. I don't know British admirals, but we got the information and we were able to corroborate it. So it's really fun, past lives, because oftentimes we can find the historical documents either in census records or, like in the admiral's case, he was a historic figure, and we can find corroborating evidence. So I always say, I can't make this stuff up. I'm not that creative.
And are you saying, Julie, then that all of us have these previous incarnations?
Oh, yeah. Hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah.
We each have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And when we think about time doesn't exist in the spirit world, it's hard for us to wrap our human minds around that. But you think it's not even a blip, a lifetime. So we never get it. We never get it all done. And it doesn't matter because we have many, many, many lifetimes to experience and explore.
So it takes the pressure off a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly. A lot of it.
Yeah. That's a really positive way at looking at life. That it is, as you said, this exploration, because there's so much suffering, isn't there? And I mean, we look even over the past year with the pandemic, so much death, both where I am and where you are. Both our countries were just horrifically hit by this pandemic. And I hope that maybe what you're saying gives people a little bit of comfort that perhaps, well, firstly, that this is not the end for those people who have lost loved ones prematurely, as we would see it from our perspective. And actually, I guess this kind of leads on to this. I know this is a completely different topic, and I'm weaving around a little bit, but I know you talk about the phases of transition when somebody passes away. Mm-hmm. Are you able to link that to what we're talking about and tell us a little bit about that? Because I don't know anything about it.
Certainly, we all have a spirit attached to our body, experiencing the human experience, basically exploring the human experience. And as such, our spirit never dies. Our body does, but our spirit doesn't. And that's how we can communicate with any spirit that's alive or deceased. It's all energy, the body's energy, the spirit's energy. And the body is inside the spirit. I went to 12 years of Catholic schools, and I was taught by the nuns that the spirit is someplace in the chest area. Well, that's not what I perceive. Right. What I perceive is that the spirit is the main part of us and the body's inside the spirit. And then it's wrapped in this membrane called the energy field membrane. So an analogy, again, back to analogies, an analogy I like to use for this, Susie, is imagine going to the pet store and buying a goldfish. They're going to put it in a plastic bag of water in order for you to get it home. So if you have a picture of that in your mind's eye, the goldfish represents our body, the water represents our spirit, and the plastic bag represents our energy field membrane. It's the container that holds the energy that makes our body and our spirit. So when somebody's dying, the spirit disengages from the body and it hangs onto the top of the head and it looks like a bubble on the top of the head, like a cartoon caption, where the words or the thoughts of the cartoon character are located. And when I scan somebody anywhere in the world, you could be on Mars, you could be anywhere. If I could reach you on Mars to talk to you, I could explain this to you, but I can scan anybody anywhere in the world and I can tell how close to death they are based on what phase of transition they're in. And there are 12 phases. And the first phase is what happens is the spirit exits the top of the body and it hangs on to the head like this bubble. And then other phases are the closest deceased maternal person. Spirit shows up. So my mother's deceased. So it would be my mother. If my mother was still alive, it would be my maternal grandmother. If she was still alive, it would be her mother. It's always on the maternal line. She's the first one to show up.
I just have to interrupt you there for 1 second before you carry on, because I want to hear the rest of it. But it just reminds me there, Julie, when my dad passed away, which was about 9 years ago. And he used to have Reiki with my Reiki master, Jackie, and she came over just at he kind of fell into this state of kind of not really being conscious that he was in for about 5 days. And she came right at the beginning and she said his real mother, because he lost his real mother when he was 2, just 2 years old. And then he had a stepmother but she said his real mother is here. And I found that really comforting, actually, that I felt there was someone like waiting for him. And he'd never really, I think, got over losing his mother at such a very, very young age. You know, he's had no memories of her. And he was now 90. And it just reminded me of that when you mentioned that. So,
well, the interesting thing about that is it's the mother spirit that runs the show from the spirit world. It's not angels. It's not God. It's the mother spirit. It's the maternal spirit that's closest to the person who's dying.
Right.
Yeah. She calls in the angels. She calls in the other deceased loved ones who come. I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. And they're all there as somebody's dying. So the maternal spirit comes in first, then the paternal spirit shows up. It's always on the maternal side, though. So, for instance, if my dad was still alive, it would be my maternal grandfather. If he was still alive, it would be his father. It's always on the maternal line, which I find fascinating. So then what happens is angels are called in, and these are big old angels as I perceive them, Susie. They have big wings and white gowns, and they're belted at the waist, with rope, and bare feet and hair cascading down to their shoulders. Is that what angels really look like? That's what angels look like to me, because that's how I was trained they look. Catholic girl, statuary, artwork, same thing with you. In the UK, the angels look like what I've just described. Yeah. Now, somebody that grew up in an indigenous culture in the Amazon may see an angel as a blob of purple energy. It's how we perceive. We're going to perceive things based on our frame of reference so our human minds can understand them. So the angels show up, and then halfway through, there are angels that show up on either side of the spirit bubble. And they are very instrumental going forward. And then other deceased loved ones from all lifetimes. I see them in all different period dress. I'll see people from current day. I'll see people dressed in 1960s attire with like mini skirts and go-go boots and stuff like that. Renaissance dressed people. Indigenous dressed people, Indians, whatever. Like with the whole, I've seen Indians with the whole Indian headdress with the feathers and stuff, American Indian kind of Indians. And so that's really interesting. And then the spirits of all the deceased pets that the person's had in their lifetime, they're there as well. Oh. And it's really fun when I see farm animals. And I'll say, well, did your mom or your grandmother grow up on a farm? And they'll say, yeah, why? I'll say, well, there are cows and chicks and goats and geese and ducks and stuff like that in the room as well. And then about phase 9, Susie, those angels on either side of the spirit bubble, their wings begin to move. And it reminds me of a giant owl, how their wings are silent and it's almost, you can feel the drag that they create. And it's very slow and it's methodical. That's what those angel wings moving remind me of. And what they do with that movement is they create a vortex above the person who's dying, above their head. And it reminds me of a tornado cloud, a funnel cloud. Yeah. And it's that centrifugal force that causes an upward draft. I can feel the suction, and it helps the spirit separate from the body. It's like, have you ever gone through a car wash where you stay in the car? And then at the end of the car wash, they turn the dryer on and it's sucking all the water off your car. Yeah. That's what it feels like to me. And then that helps the spirit disengage from the body. And then those angels escort the person's spirit to heaven. Now, a couple of interesting points about this. The vortex thing, when I was researching angelic attendants, I just Googled for kicks, giant owl wings vortex. Come to find out, there's this thing called the wingtip vortex that every bug, every bird, every plane, every jet, every kite, anything that flies has a wingtip vortex. If you Google wingtip vortex, you will get thousands of hits with aeronautical engineering drawings and explanations of the wingtip vortex, which I thought was amazing. That's number one. Number two, we all go through the 12 phases of transition, regardless of how we pass. If it's instant, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, we go through the 12 phases, because remember, time doesn't exist in the spirit world.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Because what you describe sounds very gentle and gradual. And
it's glorious.
Yeah. And I kind of wondered how, because obviously so many people unfortunately have such a terrible, violent, unforeseen death. And but that's nice to hear that you're saying it applies to everybody.
Everybody. And all these people who died in elder care facilities alone during the pandemic, and the families are suffering so much from them being alone. Nobody dies alone. We're surrounded by angels and deceased loved ones. Nobody ever dies alone.
Yeah.
Ever.
That is such a beautiful, beautiful point, because as I say, I really got an insight into that with my dad. And I just thought how lovely. I mean, I'm talking about my dad because it was my most personal experience of being, seeing that process. I thought how lovely that he's going to see his mum, who he's never seen since he was 2. I only had one photo of her. Right. And I just thought, gosh, he's going to be like, finally get to see his real mum. So that's so beautiful, because yes, it's been horrendous for so many people here in the UK as well, where they couldn't see their elderly mum who was in, a home, and then sometimes with Alzheimer's, and they just couldn't be with them in those final moments. I mean, I know people who passed away in hospital, and even within my relatives, and people were trying to speak to them on an iPad just to say goodbye, and it's really, really shockingly awful,
heart-wrenching,
and so unnatural, so against the natural order of things. But I think what you're saying gives a different angle that perhaps I hadn't really thought of, and probably other people hadn't considered as well.
Well, a couple of points that before I forget. Number one, your point about your dad seeing his birth mother, that pertains to adopted people who died too. It's the birth mother who's there running the show. It's the mother, the birth mother's there, but it's the mother who raised the child that runs the show when it's somebody who's adopted. In your dad's case, it was the birth mother because he wasn't adopted. But we all choose our parents. We choose where we're born, when we're born, to whom we're born. So our lives can have a basic trajectory to explore that script we were talking about earlier. That's number one. Number two, there's been university-based research that corroborates all of what I see in the 12 phases of transition. And there's a hospice director who's an MD and a PhD here in New York named Chris Kerr, who wrote a book called Death is But a Dream. And he did research on 1,400 hospice patients who at the end of their lives talked about that they were seeing deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets in visions or dreams as they approached death. Mm-hmm. So I laugh, I say my book's the yin, the spiritual side, his book's the yang, it's the medical and the research side. Yeah. We're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
The other thing, again, that I think is really applicable here, Susie, is there's a prayer said at the end of every Catholic funeral, and it's called In Paradisum, which is Latin for into paradise. And it may be said in the Anglican Church too. And it talks about how your deceased loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. That's what I see in the 12 phases. So when I was writing my book, I researched where did that originate? And what I found was it began in the 5th century as a Gregorian chant. So I have to believe since the beginning of time, we've all been able to see these phases. And perhaps it took till the 5th century till someone was well educated enough that they could read and write down this prayer in the form of a chant about what happens when somebody's dying. And then as we've evolved and we've gotten more well educated, certainly we've become more proof-based. We want to see proof that this really happens. Yeah. So I believe that since the beginning of time, and this goes back to our initial conversation about that we all come in with the ability, I believe everybody's been able to see this. And those abilities have been tamped down because we've become more scientifically based. But now we have Dr. Kerr's research that is the scientific proof that corroborates everything that we're seeing from a spiritual side. So I always say I love it when science catches up with woo-woo. Because woo-woo's here first.
Yes. Yeah. And there is so much. I mean, we're talking here, just for listeners, we're talking about, professors and very skeptical scientists who are doing the research, not because they initially believed in it, but they ended up believing because they couldn't refute the evidence. So there's a huge amount of evidence, isn't there, to support what you're saying?
Well, and there's lots of information, Susie, on the afterlife. There's lots of information out there about the phases of grief. There's information about near-death experiences.
Yes.
But I found that there is not much data about what's actually happening when somebody dies. And that's what we're all afraid of. We're all inundated, especially in the Western world. Are we going to fly or are we going to fry when we die?
Oh, gosh.
Well, right? But I'm here to tell you, all people go to heaven. All dogs go to heaven, that movie that was out a long time ago. All people go to heaven too. And people say to me, well, how can that be? You think of a Hitler or somebody that was just an atrocious person. That was his body. That was his human experience. That was what his spirit wanted to explore. That all stayed with the body. The spirit is pure love. Everybody's spirit is pure love. Everybody's spirit goes back to non-physical. Everybody's spirit is in heaven. Wow. So heaven is just energy, and heaven is all around us. It's not necessarily you go, hang out on a cloud up in the sky and watch things. You can if you want, but heaven is all around us. So the wonderful thing about this too is that our loved ones are always around us. They're just in a different form. It's like what we learned in school. Water can be liquid. It can be solid like ice. It can be a vapor. It's still water. It's still the same components. It's a different shape. And that's how spirit is.
So what you're saying is people who have, there's so many people who are grieving at the moment from people they've lost in the pandemic or in whatever, that they can connect with those loved ones merely by thinking about them and just talk to them and know that they are being heard.
Exactly. And the deceased loved ones will answer. And it's going to come in, Susie, it's going to feel like a thought in our brain. And it's going to come in a nanosecond. So you'll have a thought and you'll know it's from your loved one because a lot of times it'll come in before you even get the thought all the way. You're having a thought and it takes a second to think the thought, but you're already getting the answer before that thought's all the way thought out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because again, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So our time of a second to think the thought, they already know what the thought is and they're bringing it back to us with the answer. How you know that it's them answering you is it comes back within a second. If you think about it for more than a couple of seconds, that's going to be your brain talking to you.
Yeah.
The other thing to remember is spirits are really literal. So be specific if you're looking for advice, because we're going to interpret their response in a way through our interpretation, but we want to ask the question in a way. It's always predicated on how we ask the question. Let me give you an example. If you say, like to your dad, hey, Dad, am I going to enjoy the movie? And you get a yes, comes into your head instantly. And you're like, okay, good. So you're watching some movie tonight on TV and you're thinking, Dad, this is atrocious. Why did you tell me we'd enjoy the movie? Well, he gave you a correct answer because how you asked the question could pertain to any movie that you watched any time in your life. Right? So if you would have said, hey, Dad, are we going to enjoy watching Disney Plus on the BBC channel tonight? See the difference in the way that you ask the question. So you want to be really specific if you're asking for advice or asking a question, number one. Number two, you want to understand that Spirit's always going to answer not only in a correct way, but in either a neutral or a positive way. They're never going to say anything abusive, like, oh, you're an ugly person who drools. It's not going to happen. It's not going to come from Spirit. I'll have people say to me every once in a while, I have this Spirit that's communicating to me and he's saying all these awful things to me and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's not the Spirit. Spirit's pure love. That's you. That's your interpretation of what's going on there. It's your fear that's skewing the message coming from Spirit. Spirit's pure love. Pure love can't give you something that's going to sound abusive or feel abusive. Doesn't work that way.
So even Julie, people who have had parents who sadly were awful to them and maybe physically abused them, emotionally, sexually, whatever, what you're saying is that this relationship transforms once they've passed on, and the parents no longer look at their living children with the, that violence and all the other negative stuff that they had while they were here.
Well, it's never about how they look at their children. It's always about their own fear. Their own fear is driving their behavior. And so that behavior stays with the body. Their spirit is pure love. And when we remember that we choose to whom we're born, where we're born, when we're born, and the circumstances into which we're born, so that our lives can have a trajectory that's going to help us explore and experience what our spirit came in to explore, it really takes the sting out of a lot of that. And once we get over, why would I choose that? Well, again, we create out of conflict, out of that contrast, even more so than conflict, the contrast of, we know we don't want this, so this gives us the opportunity to create what we do want. Many parents who are abusive, they create lives for themselves and their families that are not abusive. Some keep the abuse going for multi-generations, and that's their choice. That's what their spirit's exploring. So again, in the spirit world, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. It's just an experience. Hard for us to wrap our human minds around.
It is extremely difficult.
Yeah, but we need to have rules in the human existence, right? Because it helps us create out of the contrast. We can't have people going around killing each other all the time. I mean, we wouldn't be around to have that exploration. But in the spirit world, what I'm told, and have been told this for decades, is spirit just sees things as an experience. Mm-hmm. So a child that's abused, as horrific as that is in our human form, that child, it helps that child create what they want. What are they creating out of that abuse? Are they creating a life where they're helping other abused children? Are they creating a life where when they have children, they're going to make darn sure that nothing happens like that ever to them again? Are they going to write about their experiences and help humanity understand what's going on? Are they going to be a psychologist? Are they going to be a doctor? I mean, what's being created? We don't know what their spirit came in to explore. And so we don't know how this is benefiting them, but everything unfolds perfectly, even when it seems horrific.
Yeah, as you say, very challenging for us to kind of wrap our heads around that. Because it sounds as if, as you say, we're saying that someone would choose that. If someone's in a horrendous position at this moment,
right?
And they kind of think, well, they're being accused of choosing it. They might think that that's kind of belittling, or so I can see how people would find that a very difficult notion, and it's something to definitely sit with. And
especially initially, it's hard for us to wrap our heads around it. But then when we think about, okay, well, there are good things that come out of every situation. I was listening to a podcast this morning of a physician who was talking about using foods to help heal cancer. And he was talking in particular about blueberries and kiwi and broccoli and how they have all these amazing healing properties to them. And he was saying one of the things that has been a silver lighting out of the pandemic is people are starting to think about, what can I do to enhance my immune system so I don't get sick? Mm-hmm. And he said, before this, people really didn't think about that. What would happen would be they would think about it perhaps when they got ill, but not necessarily before that, because they were busy living their lives. But this gave people the opportunity to say, okay, what can I do while I'm at home and I have to cook? What can I do to help my body have a robust immune system? And I think that's a great example, Susie, of there's always a silver lining in every cloud. That's just one example of the wonderful things that have come out of the pandemic. Not to negate the horrific things as well and all the people that lost loved ones, but there are always wonderful aspects to every situation, always. And sometimes we have to look at them and really look at them from a different perspective and say, okay, well, yeah, that is a good thing that came out of this.
And I guess sometimes, Julie, we won't know in this lifetime what the good thing was, you know?
Or we won't know right away, but we may know later on.
We may do. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely gives a whole new prism to looking at life's challenges when you're looking at it from the perspective you're talking about. And I guess people that do have that prism would be less stressed by adversity. Do you find that?
Yeah, that. And the other thing I had a thought about, we were talking about the pandemic, all the people who lost loved ones in the pandemic. What I hear from the people who are deceased, their spirits, is, and this is across the board with anybody who's recently passed, every one of those spirits tell me, Susie, it's great because I can be with all my loved ones all at the same time. I'm around my loved ones way more now than I was when I was in my body, especially during the pandemic. So we're made in the image and likeness of God. And most of us think that means that God looks like some old man, like Dumbledore from the Harry Potter movies or Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings movies, white hair, long white beard, all of that. Yeah. I believe we're made in the image and likeness of God in spirit form. So if God is everywhere all at the same time, we in spirit form have the ability to do that as well. So we can be with all of our loved ones all at the same time. And that's so comforting to my clients who are grieving the loss of a loved one for any reason, whether it was the pandemic or anything. So there's that. But I think the other thing with all of this is we're here to explore, and our thoughts as spirits, I talked about spirits have their own frequency. Thoughts have their own frequency as well. So thoughts come in from the ethers. They don't originate in our heads. And every thought has its own frequency. When it comes into our heads, it gets assigned an emotion. And that's how we interpret things, is through emotion. We're taught as young children to control our emotions. Don't you cry when you're in the middle of wherever, because it's, you need to be quiet. You need to control your emotion. When in essence, our emotions are an internal GPS system, Susie, that tells us when we're in alignment with our spirit and when we're out of alignment.
So how does that work? So how this
works, we don't need to control our emotions. We need to control our thoughts. Because thoughts don't originate in our heads, right? We can control what we think. So our emotions are very valuable. We don't want to control our emotions. We want to control our thoughts. So how this works is when you have a thought that either feels neutral or good, you're in alignment with your spirit, which is pure love. When you have a thought that feels bad in any way, boredom, jealousy, anger, fear, whatever, that's our GPS system saying, hey, you're out of alignment, girl. Look at this from a different perspective. So I came up with this technique. May I share it with you of how to do this?
Please do, yes.
Okay. You're going to love it because it's free and it's convenient. It works anywhere your brain is. Your brain's usually with you wherever you are. So it's convenient.
Usually, yes.
So how this works is when you have a thought that feels bad, like, I have so much guilt because I wasn't with my grandmother when she passed, because I couldn't be with her because of COVID. And you know how that'll lead to another thought, another thought, another thought. Before you know it, you feel awful. You've got this black hole of all these thoughts you've had. What we want to do is we want to be able to differentiate between a bad thought that's based in a rational fear, which is legitimate, like get out of the road before the bus runs you over, and an irrational fear, which is fake, that we're making up, which is 99% of the negative thoughts we have. They're fake. They're fake news. So here's the technique. When you have a thought that feels bad, you say to yourself, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? You call it the 2-minute rule. If it is, get out of the road before the bus runs you over. That's a rational fear. If it isn't, you know it's false. You know you're making it up. As soon as you ask that question, Susie, what happens is it disrupts that frequency that those thoughts are coming in on, like a radio station, raises your vibrational level, gets you back in alignment with your spirit, because spirit's pure love. Curiosity's based in love. Curiosity's fun. It's interesting. You want to know more, right? So you've broken that connection, and then spirit can guide you, and you'll get a thought like, maybe I'll read Julie's book about, how nobody dies alone. Maybe I'll look at this website. Maybe I'll do that. That's spirit sending thoughts into our heads of things that we can do to take the next step. So the 2-minute rule, if you make it a habit, it's going to rock your world and enhance your life in every way.
Yeah.
You can use it in any instance.
Yeah. I can see how that would be so helpful because, of course, as you quite rightly say, most of the stuff that we spend all day getting anxious and worried and stressed about, it never happens, and it's not anchored in any sort of reality, but we just ruminate and go round on a loop.
That's right.
So I love the simplicity of that.
Yep.
I'm going to try it. I'm going to share it with people.
When you make it a habit, what happens, Susie, is you're going to feel good most of the time. Now, when you feel good 100% of the time, you're dead. Because, again, we create out of the contrast. So nobody feels good 100% of the time unless they're dead, right? So that's number one. Number two, the other thing is when you feel good most of the time, you're going to create more things that feel good. When we feel badly, we create more things that feel bad.
That's
because we're in an attractive universe. And so the 2-minute rule, you can teach to little kids. You can use it in any situation, and it's just going to enhance your life in just immeasurable ways. You're going to be amazed at how you walk around and you feel good most of the time. And then when you don't, you just automatically do the 2-minute rule and you snap yourself out of it, and then you're back to getting guidance. Meditation, I think, is a great example of us learning to control our thoughts. When we meditate, we're taught, all right, watch that thought come in and go back out. And then another thought's going to come in and go back out, which is in line with what I'm talking about. Thoughts don't originate in our heads. They're coming from the ethers. They're coming in. We can control what we think, which in turn controls how we feel, which in turn controls what our experiences of life are.
Yeah. So I can see this as a whole virtual circle of
exactly.
Feeling better, then attracting more positivity into your life in whatever way that manifests. And that's so exciting. It's such a hopeful, I think it's just such a hopeful concept and empowering. So I really like that. And thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. You bet.
So tell us about, you mentioned your book, Julie. So
yes.
Tell us
Angelic Attendants.
A little bit about that, because
what really happens as we transition from this life into the next is the book, and it's about the 12 phases of transition, and it's has stories in it of families with whom I've worked. So it's really, people tell me I didn't expect it to be a page turner, and I didn't expect that it would be just so much fun to read, because the stories are really, I can't make them up, but they're really interesting. And I have one woman that read my book, and she said she was sitting in a different room in her home, and her sons and her husband were in the other room watching a football game or something. And she kept yelling out loud, "Oh my God, no way. Oh, you're kidding. Oh, what?" And they finally came and they said, "Mom, what are you doing?" She said, "I'm reading this book and I can't believe it." So Angelic Attendants is the first one. And then I have 2 children's books too, Suze, and Angel Messages for Kids and Angel Messages for Dogs. And they're really cute. They're storybooks for kids, picture books. Cute. And they have darling illustrations in them. And it's angels telling children things about spirit and about how is it that you can see your deceased grandmother, but mommy and daddy can't. How's that work? Mm-hmm. How is it that you know information from a past life that can be corroborated? And I've had lots of moms throughout the years say, "Please write a book so I can explain this to my child."
Oh, because children are so much more aware of these things, aren't they?
Well, they haven't shut down their intuitive abilities yet. Mm-hmm. Usually it happens around the age of about 6 or 7 when adults say, "Oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not really real." But it is real, and they can use it to enhance their lives when they don't shut it down. Mm. And then what happens when somebody dies and they're at the funeral home and little Johnny says, mommy says to little Johnny, "Well, grandma's in heaven now." And he says, "No, she's not. She's in that box over there asleep, in the casket." And how do you explain that? How do you explain how you can talk to spirits? So that's how that all originated. And Angel Messages for Cats is coming out at the end of the year. It's a whole series that we're working on. So any of your listeners that want copies of my books, just go to AskJulieRyan.com, the Ask Julie page, click on that, just say, "Hey, I heard you on Susie's show. I'd love a copy of your book." And if you have children or grandchildren, say you want a copy of the children's books, and we'll send you digital and audiobook versions for free as a gift.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful gift. And I'm sure a lot of families will really benefit from that. I love the fact that you are bringing this down to a child's level. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How gorgeous. Yeah.
So share it with your family members who are grieving the loss of your dad. And,
we've. I mean, it was a long time ago, so we're okay. Obviously, we'll remember him, all the time. But thank you. That's very, very kind of you. So, anything final that you'd like to leave listeners with, Julie? I mean, you have so much positivity. I can see it's just radiating off of you, and I think your message definitely is such a beautifully positive one. So any final words that you'd like to leave people with?
Everything can be healed. Every illness can be healed. We're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience. We don't end. It never ends. Our loved ones are around us. It's just fun. Pay attention in your life. Do things that are fun and interesting and that you enjoy. There's no reason to slog through it. There's always a silver lining to every cloud. Always use the 2-minute rule. Utilize the skill sets that we have, that we come in intuitively. We all have intuitive skill sets. Use those. We all have them. Use those to enhance your life. All information for me is at AskJulieRyan.com on my website. All my social media is in Ask Julie Ryan, YouTube, Ask Julie Ryan. Information on my class, on my show. I do it every Thursday night at 8 Eastern in the U.S., and it's a blast. People call in from all over and ask these questions. You can download it anywhere you get podcasts, on YouTube, whatever. So you can submit a question online, answer questions online. So it's a lot of fun. But those 12 phases of transition to the illustrations are on AskJulieRyan.com. So you can look at those there as well.
And it's very clear, actually. It's a very beautiful, clear way of representing it that you can just see at a glance. So I want to thank you for all of your amazing resources and everything that you put out in the world. It's really amazing to see, and I feel very privileged to have had this time with you. I'm definitely going to go away and think about a lot of what you told me and told listeners. So thank you so much, and may you continue your amazing work for many, many years to come.
Thanks for having me on. Sending you love from Sweet Home Alabama in the Southeast U.S.
Thank you so much. Take care, Julie.
Bye.